sun had barely begun its climb over the skyline of Riverwood, spilling golden light across the quiet streets and the aged, ivy-draped houses that lined them. Fiona Reynolds stood at the threshold of her childhood home, her fingers brushing against the familiar, worn brass doorknob. She paused, taking in the delicate scent of damp earth and morning dew, memories washing over her in waves, smiles, laughter, whispered secrets with her sister, faint arguments over chores, the little victories that seemed monumental at the time. Yet today, as the wind tousled her hair and a distant train rattled in the background, nothing felt familiar. Everything had shifted in a subtle but profound way. A week ago, she had received a letter from a law firm she had never heard of, informing her of changes she could barely comprehend. The family estate, the land that had been in the Reynolds lineage for 3 generations, was being sold, and she had been left out entirely. Her mind raced. She thought back to the numerous conversations with her parents, who had always emphasized trust, loyalty, and familial bonds. "We're a family," her father had said countless times, voice rich with gravitas. "No one will take what is yours, Fiona." And now? Now it seemed like every word had been a calculated distraction, a smokescreen masking years of subtle manipulation. Fiona inhaled deeply, the air tinged with the scent of damp leaves and freshly turned soil, grounding her in the present. She glanced down at her hands, slightly trembling, and ran a thumb across the back of her notebook. She had meticulously documented every detail, every conversation that hinted at deceit, the emails between her parents and Garrett, her older brother, the sudden changes in accounts and property titles. The evidence was mounting, yet she felt an unfamiliar twinge of fear. Confronting her family was no longer a question of choice. It was necessary. By the time she stepped into the grand hall, the polished wooden floors reflecting the morning light, a strange dichotomy filled her. Nostalgia mixed with the cold sting of betrayal. Every portrait lining the walls seemed to judge her, the eyes of ancestors she had never met now coldly observing, as if aware of the secrets harbored in the room. Fiona moved to the old piano, running her fingers over the keys, producing a note that echoed and then faded, leaving silence in its wake. She whispered to herself, almost as a reassurance. This isn't just about the estate. It's about the truth. Her first task was to speak with her mother, Eleanor, who sat by the window, hands folded neatly over a cup of tea. Eleanor's posture was impeccable, but her eyes, slightly downcast, betrayed a flicker of unease. Fiona approached and paused, observing the subtle tension in the room. "Good morning, Mum," Fiona began, voice measured. "I think we need to discuss the recent developments regarding the estate." Eleanor's gaze flickered upward, lips pressed in a faint, tight line. "Fiona," she said softly, "we were going to talk about this. I wanted to wait until the lawyers finalized everything." Fiona's eyes narrowed slightly. "Wait. So you knew the property was being sold and didn't think it appropriate to inform me beforehand?" There was a moment of silence, the kind that stretches and coils like smoke. Eleanor's hands tightened around the teacup. "You know, it's complicated," she murmured. "Garrett has been handling a lot of the estate matters. I thought it would be easier for everyone if Easier, Fiona echoed, voice rising slightly, controlled yet edged with disbelief. Easier for who? Because it certainly wasn't easier for me. The room seemed to shrink, the morning light now harsh and accusatory, highlighting Eleanor's slight flush and the taut line of her jaw. Fiona's breath hitched imperceptibly as she recalled the family dinners, the subtle remarks, the off-handed comments about how certain things were better left to Garrett. Every moment that had once seemed innocent now appeared as a stitch in a tapestry of betrayal. She sat across from her mother, notebook open, pen ready. I've documented every conversation, every change in the accounts, every letter and email that indicates discrepancies, Fiona said, voice steady but firm. Mom, you know I'm not making accusations lightly, but we need transparency. If there's anything to be clarified, I need the facts. Now. Eleanor's lips quivered, and for a fleeting moment, vulnerability shone through her otherwise composed demeanor. Fiona, you don't understand everything, she said, voice low. There are pressures, expectations, decisions I made to protect the family. Fiona leaned in, intensity radiating. Protect the family, or protect yourself and Garrett at the expense of truth? Because the pattern is clear, and I intend to understand it fully. The tension in the room was electric, but it wasn't just between mother and daughter. Fiona felt the weight of generations, the history of decisions and secrets pressing against her resolve. She knew the path forward required more than emotional confrontation. It demanded strategic clarity. By midday, she moved to confront Garrett. Her brother's office overlooked the same garden where they had played as children, but the atmosphere was starkly different. The sunlight streamed through the windows, glinting off sleek modern furniture that felt alien against the backdrop of their childhood home. Garrett rose as she entered, a forced smile on his face. Fiona, he said, voice calm. I didn't expect you here so early. Morning, Garrett, Fiona replied evenly. We need to talk about the estate and about your recent decisions. Garrett's brow furrowed, his eyes flicking to the papers she held. I don't see why we need to make this a confrontation, he said smoothly. It's not a confrontation, Fiona said, tone crisp. It's a clarification. You've made decisions that directly impact me, and I have every right to understand your reasoning. Their dialogue continued, a careful dance of words, half-truths and implications. Fiona repeated critical points twice to reinforce clarity and force transparency, while Garrett tried to navigate the conversation with politeness that barely masked defensiveness. She noticed his micro-expressions, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the shifting weight on his feet, non-verbal admissions that gave her leverage. As afternoon settled, Fiona's thoughts returned to Clara. She walked through the garden, each step a reminder of the stakes involved. Clara, her daughter, embodied the innocence and trust that had been strained and manipulated by adult choices. Protecting her wasn't just about property or inheritance. It was about restoring agency, teaching boundaries, and modeling strength. Fiona prepared for the family council meeting that evening. The dining room was set with meticulous care, each plate and glass positioned perfectly, a visual representation of order in a world that felt increasingly chaotic. guests began to arrive. Distant relatives, family friends, legal advisors, all unknowingly witnesses to a reckoning long in preparation. The discussion unfolded with a rhythm that mirrored the tension in the room. Fiona maintained control through repetition of facts, measured questions, and strategic pauses. She let silence carry meaning, allowing the weight of truth to permeate. Her family's attempts at persuasion, flattery, and subtle intimidation were neutralized by her composure and preparation. By nightfall, as the meeting drew to a close, Fiona had established clarity, respect, and boundaries. The path ahead remained complex, but she had reclaimed agency. Clara, observing quietly, smiled. A small affirmation that the work, though exhausting, was vital and meaningful. The moon rose over Riverwood, casting silver light across the garden where Fiona and Clara walked hand in hand. It was a moment of calm, of reflection, yet also a reminder of the resilience, strategy, and courage required to navigate family, power, and truth. The following morning, Riverwood stirred under a crisp, pale sunlight. Birds flitted between the old oak trees, their chirps blending with the distant hum of early commuters. Fiona stood by the kitchen window, her mind restless, sipping coffee she barely tasted. Clara had left for school, backpack slung over her small shoulders, waving goodbye with a cheerful grin that didn't quite reach Fiona's anxious eyes. Today's agenda was daunting. Fiona had scheduled a series of meetings with lawyers, financial advisors, and family friends to untangle the web of decisions that had left her sidelined from her inheritance and from control of the family estate. Her father's casual reassurances had long since been replaced by the cold reality of legal documentation. Each line of print in the letters she had amassed felt like a puzzle piece, forming a picture of deceit that was both meticulous and deliberate. Before leaving the house, Fiona reviewed her notes, her pen tracing each entry with deliberate care. Garrett's email to the bank, the forged signatures, Mum's testimony. I need every angle covered. She repeated the critical points aloud, a technique she had learned over years of public speaking and mediation. Repetition ensured clarity and reinforced her memory for high-stakes discussions. At the law firm, she was met by Jacob Lang, an attorney specializing in inheritance and property disputes. His office was sleek, walls lined with books that smelled of old paper and varnish, a calm and organized space, in stark contrast to the storm that awaited outside. Jacob shook her hand firmly. Fiona, I've reviewed the documents you sent. I must say, the situation is more complicated than it initially appears, he began. His voice was measured, conveying both authority and empathy. Fiona exhaled slowly. Complicated, yes, but not unsolvable. My goal isn't confrontation, it's clarity. I need to understand exactly what has been done, by whom, and why I was kept in the dark. Jacob nodded, flipping through the thick binder before him. From the documents, it appears that Garrett and Eleanor have taken a series of steps, transfers, title changes, and financial maneuvers, without notifying you. Legally, they've tried to maintain a semblance of propriety, but there are gaps we can leverage. This is where strategy comes into play. Fiona's heart pounded. a mix of anticipation and determination. "Every detail matters," she said. "We're not just talking about land or money. This is about family, trust, and the principles my grandfather established. I intend to honor that legacy." The discovery. After the meeting, Fiona returned to the estate to find Garrett in the garden, pruning the hedges with meticulous care. He looked up, feigning casualness. "Morning," he said, voice neutral. "Morning, Garrett," Fiona replied, stepping closer. "We need to discuss the bank transactions and the property sale." He straightened, brushing leaves off his sleeves. "Again with the paperwork. I've told you, it's all in order. Your grandfather wouldn't have wanted you involved in every minor detail." Fiona shook her head. "Not minor details. Decisions that affect my life, my daughter's future, and the legacy of this family are not minor." She repeated the last line slowly, emphasizing each word, a subtle but effective tactic to anchor the weight of her statement. Garrett's eyes flickered, a momentary crack in his composure. Fiona noticed. She pressed on. "Jacob has gone through everything. There are inconsistencies, unexplained transfers, and your correspondence with Mum that I need to understand." He sighed, the sound carrying resignation. "Fiona, you've always been precise. Maybe too precise. But this isn't personal." "It is personal," Fiona countered. "It affects my family, my daughter, and whether you recognize it or not, it's about fairness and truth." By noon, Fiona had arranged a discreet meeting with Clara's school counselor, hoping to gather insights on how the family situation might be affecting her daughter. The counselor, Ms. Delaney, welcomed her with warmth, recognizing the delicate nature of the discussion. "Clara has been unusually quiet in class, more withdrawn than usual," Ms. Delaney noted. "She asks fewer questions, doesn't engage in group activities. I wondered if something at home might be influencing her behavior." Fiona's chest tightened. She's aware of the tension with the estate. She saw hints, fragments of conversations she wasn't supposed to. "I've tried to shield her, but children sense more than we give them credit for." Ms. Delaney nodded knowingly. "Yes, and it's crucial to provide stability. Maintaining her routine, clear communication, and reassurance will help mitigate the impact." Fiona repeated these key phrases in her mind, reinforcing the importance of her role as protector. She knew that her next steps would not only resolve the estate conflict, but also stabilize her daughter's emotional world. That evening, the family gathered in the estate's great hall. The lighting was warm but subdued, casting long shadows across the room that seemed to echo the tension lingering in the air. Friends and distant relatives were present, unaware of the underlying conflict. Fiona entered with Clara at her side. Garrett offered a polite nod. Eleanor a faint, tense smile. The room buzzed with polite conversation until Fiona took a deep breath and addressed everyone. "I've called this meeting to clarify decisions regarding the estate," she began. "I will outline what I know and present questions that require honest answers. The goal is transparency, not conflict. But I will not accept evasions." She spoke slowly, deliberately, repeating critical points twice to emphasize their importance and to create subtle psychological pressure. Each statement was measured, designed to maintain control of the narrative while forcing others to respond truthfully. Garrett shifted uneasily. Eleanor's hands fidgeted with the folds of her dress, and the relatives exchanged glances. The subtle tension thickened the air, a palpable mix of curiosity, guilt, and anticipation. Fiona walked through each document, outlining dates, transactions, and communications. Questions were pointed but calm. Silence followed each revelation, allowing the weight of truth to settle. She strategically repeated critical facts, ensuring comprehension and emotional impact. By the end of the session, concessions had been made, at least in acknowledgement. Fiona had maintained control, preserved her integrity, and set the stage for the next phase of action. Clara, quietly observing, leaned slightly toward her mother, a small hand finding hers, a silent affirmation of support and trust. The following morning, the estate was unusually silent. The soft light of dawn filtered through the tall windows, casting elongated shadows across the oak floors. Fiona sat at the breakfast table, a single cup of coffee steaming in front of her, but she barely noticed it. Her mind replayed every moment from the family meeting the night before. The subtle nods, the tight smiles, the carefully chosen words that concealed more than they revealed. Clara bounded down the stairs, her small backpack bouncing with every step. "Mum, are we going to the park today?" she asked, voice bright and innocent. Fiona forced a smile, bending down to hug her daughter. "Soon, sweetie, but first we have to finish some important work." The work was clear. Dismantle the remaining obstacles and reclaim control. Fiona had spent the night strategizing, reviewing documents, emails, and legal records. Each layer of deception she uncovered fueled a mixture of resolve and righteous anger. She repeated to herself, quietly, the mantra that had carried her through countless challenges. Truth is persistent. Justice is patient. By mid-morning, Fiona called Garrett to the study. The room smelled faintly of old books and polished wood, a reminder of the legacy she was fighting to preserve. Garrett entered with an air of cautious nonchalance, yet Fiona noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders, the slight hesitation in his stride. "Garrett," she began, her voice calm yet imbued with authority. "There are remaining inconsistencies in the estate records that need clarification." He smiled thinly, attempting a casual tone. "Fiona, I thought we settled most of this yesterday." "We did, partially," she countered. "But partial clarity isn't enough. There are details that still threaten the stability of our family assets. And more importantly, our integrity. I need answers, and I need them now." Fiona repeated key points twice, a technique she found invaluable for emphasizing critical issues and maintaining psychological leverage. Garrett's expression flickered. A micro-expression of discomfort passed over his face, barely perceptible but unmistakable to someone as observant as Fiona. Fiona had compiled a comprehensive binder containing every piece of evidence: financial records, bank statements, letters and email correspondence. Each document told a story of intentional obfuscation, designed to sideline her in decisions that should have been collaborative. She opened the binder deliberately, flipping to the first page and read aloud. On March 12th, the transfer of assets was initiated without prior consultation or disclosure to me. the primary heir and caretaker of this estate. Garrett attempted to interject, but Fiona's steady gaze silenced him. She repeated the statement for clarity, allowing its weight to sink in. Eleanor entered silently, her presence adding a layer of tension. Fiona acknowledged her calmly. "Mum, your role in these transactions is noted," Fiona said. "I need to understand your rationale. Were these actions in the family's best interest or self-serving decisions?" Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. I thought I was protecting everyone," she stammered, voice trembling. "Garrett has always been more experienced in these matters. I wanted to avoid conflict." Fiona leaned forward, eyes unwavering. Avoiding conflict by exclusion is still a choice. It has consequences, and those consequences have already impacted Clara and me. We must rectify this now. Later, Fiona spent a quiet moment with Clara in the garden. The sunlight highlighted strands of golden hair and the innocence in her eyes. Clara had always been perceptive, often noticing nuances adults overlooked. "Mum, why does everyone look so serious?" Clara asked, tilting her head. "Because, darling, sometimes grown-ups make decisions that aren't fair," Fiona replied softly. She repeated the phrase in simpler terms, ensuring Clara could internalize the lesson. Sometimes decisions aren't fair, but we can fix them. Clara nodded, a solemn understanding in her expression. "Can we make it fair?" she asked. "Yes, we will," Fiona promised, squeezing her hand. "And we'll do it together." Throughout the day, Fiona engaged with advisors, uncovering more layers of obfuscation. Legal counsel explained subtle loopholes and potential leverage points, which Fiona meticulously noted. She prepared a list of questions and demands to present during the next family council. Each negotiation was punctuated with repetition of critical points, strategic pauses, and calibrated emotional pressure. Fiona knew that human behavior often reacted to perceived control. By pacing her arguments and reinforcing facts, she maintained authority without escalating hostility unnecessarily. That evening, the family council reconvened in the estate's grand hall. The air was thick with anticipation. Extended family members, legal representatives, and advisors gathered, sensing the gravity of the discussion. Fiona took her seat at the head of the table, her composure commanding attention. "Tonight," she began, "we will address the remaining issues regarding the estate. I ask for honesty, transparency, and accountability." She outlined discrepancies, repeated essential points, and allowed silence to punctuate the discussion. Each pause created tension, forcing the participants to confront the weight of their actions. Garrett's defences began to crack, Eleanor's composure wavered, and the advisors scribbled notes, aware that history was being documented in real time.